Hello and welcome back to the Motorsport Baithak podcast. I'm your host Didi, and joining me once again today is my friend and your co-host Vedant. On this episode, we'll be talking about the Formula One Austrian GP. So let's grab some chai, take our seats, ready our opinions, and dive right into the conversation. Hello Vedant. What an Austrian GP compared to the last one. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat for the entirety of the race. Max Verstappen took it from pole, but that didn't make the race any less interesting. And now Verstappen is 32 points ahead in the championship compared to Hamilton. Well, what is your take on the race?
It was one of the most exciting races we have had this season. Not in terms of, you know, crashes and all that, but just the content up and down the grid. Everyone was fighting again, as we saw in Baku and a few other races so far.
And you have to give it up for the defensive driving we saw, through the entirety of the race. First, we saw Norris defend from Hamilton. Then, towards the end of the race, we saw, George Russell defending from Fernando Alonso. And then we saw Sergio Perez defending Charles Leclerc nearly all the way throughout the race. And there was some great defensive driving in there. And you just didn't know whether, they were going to crash, they were going to take each other out. What was going to happen? Were they going to be able to, overtake successfully?
Yeah.
And, unluckily so, Kimi Räikkönen did end up, tangling with Sebastian Vettel towards the end of the race and picking up 3 penalty points. But, oh my God, what a race, it's just hard to put it in words. And really heartbreaking for George Russell especially, ran in the points nearly throughout the race, had a bad start, but finished P11 behind Fernando Alonso, getting overtaken, I think, 3 laps from the very end. So, a lot of storylines coming out of this particular weekend, but let's dive right into it. Into the biggest issue, the biggest talking point from the weekend, the penalties. What do you think? Were the penalties fair? Especially, let's look at them incident-wise. Let me know what you think about each incident and the penalty associated with it. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about just, the racing incidents between Sergio and Leclerc and the one between Norris and Sergio. And not the other penalties regarding, double waved yellows and Kimi's accident, all of those things.
Yeah, well, these were racing incidents, so even before we start judging them, they are very subjective. And everyone was of the opinion that both the penalties were unfair in a way. Even Christian Horner, who you would expect to back his driver Sergio Perez, said that Norris's penalty was unfair in a way. And then again, with with Perez and Leclerc fighting throughout, which was spectacular to see, by the way, a Ferrari and Red Bull fighting once again. But yeah, in my opinion, all 3 of them were unfair. Obviously, Perez did it a second time, so maybe that second time they could have given him a penalty. But if you take them as isolated incidents, I think it was a tad bit unfair. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think most people would agree with you, and I do too. I largely agree with you, but like Norris said, and I think Fernando said too. And if you look at the race, there were many incidents where even Norris and Fernando went for the move around turn 4, but they backed out because they were on the outside. And Norris did say after the race was over that it was just stupid. And what did Sergio expect if he was going around the outside, which is fair enough. And we've seen racing for the last few years, and we know if you're on the outside line, the person on the inside, especially if he's ahead of you, he's got no obligation to give you any room on the outside. And we've seen people, do the same thing, push drivers outside, who push drivers off the track, who are taking the outside line basically. But we don't complain because usually in Formula 1, especially these days, there's a little bit of a runoff before there's gravel, so none of the drivers lose, 5-6 positions like Perez did, or like as much time as Charles did in the 2 incidents. But from my opinion, the first incident the incident between Norris and Perez, I think the penalty was really unfair because Sergio was nowhere near ahead of Norris. Again, it's a little bit debatable, but I just don't think that was a penalty at all. Just like I agree with Christian Horner and like what you said. And the second incident between Sergio and Leclerc. Leclerc was not ahead of Perez at all, going into turn 6, I believe, on the outside, and I think it was fair enough for Sergio to push him out. But the first incident between Sergio and Leclerc was, I wouldn't say clearly ahead or half a car length ahead of Sergio, but he was definitely ahead because if you look back at the replay, Sergio comes a little from behind and his wing and his tires hit the front wheel of Leclerc, from behind. So clearly, Sergio was a little behind at the apex of turn 4 during that particular incident, and I think if the FIA were to award him a penalty for that particular incident, I wouldn't debate it as much, and I would have accepted it. But again, I think FIA chose to be inconsistent to be consistent in an inconsistent way on the wrong day once again, and infuriating some fans. But again, the question just comes back to the same thing as to what can FIA do to resolve these issues, because at the end of the day, it's just humans, awarding penalties, it's humans judging incidents, coming to conclusions and awarding these penalties. So what can FIA, what can the stewards, what can the drivers and the teams do to make these situations more clearer? Can there be more than a gentleman's agreement? Can there be like a sporting regulation that outlines these little nuances in racing in these grey areas?
See, talking about your point, these grey areas and these, like these things are what make Formula One and racing an art essentially, because it is not word to word, and it is not like a science or something that okay, this is going to be it. And we have seen the more restrictions are put on Formula One teams, the angrier people get, and like fans and the drivers and the teams, everyone. So I'm not entirely sure anything can be added to the rule book as such, but yes, definitely the FIA should be more consistent and be more,
because the fans want to see hard racing, and what we saw with Sergio and Leclerc and Norris was hard racing. But again, are they defining hard racing as giving each other space and not running each other off the track, or are they defining hard racing as committing to the rules of racing, committing to the rules of sportsmanship in the context of racing, as we've learned over the last ever since racing has existed, because I think Paul Di Resta in the commentary also said that that Sergio was in the wrong. Sergio decided to make the move on Norris, and Norris was not in the wrong to have pushed Sergio off track, and similarly for the Sergio Leclerc incident. But anyway, I think we've made our views clear, so let's move on. Let's talk about Red Bull and the pace that they have shown. Clearly, I think after the Styrian GP, Cristiano made clear that Red Bull were bringing some more updates to the Austrian GP, and the effect of those upgrades on the Red Bull car's performance was pretty evident throughout the course of the weekend. But I think 32 points is the max, is the largest amount of lead that Lewis Hamilton has ever overcome to win a championship coming from behind. I think 25 is the highest, so 32 is way more than that. So what can we expect from Mercedes, because they have announced that they'll be bringing major upgrades to Silverstone. So what is going on there according to you?
Well, Mercedes have announced that they will bring in major upgrades, but Lewis Hamilton himself has said that those upgrades won't help them catch Red Bull outright. So again, I mean, Mercedes are clearly on the back foot here, and it is definitely Red Bull's and Max Verstappen's season to lose. But yeah, I mean, we know Mercedes, and we know their work ethic, and we know how Toto Wolff works. Toto Wolff leads that company, leads that team. So I won't be surprised if they fight back and continue fighting towards the end, till the end of the season. But
definitely, I wouldn't be signing off Mercedes just yet either.
Yeah, it looks very, very difficult for them. It is quite an uphill task for them right now.
Yeah, but if you look at the season past, you might as well say that Lewis hasn't turned up to race just yet. You got to wait until the summer break is over. You got to wait until Mercedes reevaluate their position and come back. You got to wait until Lewis switches on the championship. And that only happens in the second half of the season. And, we all want a close championship fight. So I guess that is what we are wishing for. It was really weird, before the weekend, hoping for a Lewis win at the end of Austrian GP. For all the past few years, we've been hoping for a different winner every race, but it was just weird hoping for a Lewis win at the Austrian GP this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we want to see a great championship fight. If Red Bull do take the championship away from Mercedes, it's well and good. But if there's a championship fight till the last race of the season, that's going to be mega.
But Schumi fans will be saying that Verstappen is doing God's work protecting Schumi's record of 7
Yeah.
title wins. But then again, Lewis Hamilton has signed a 2-year extension with Mercedes until the end of 2023, so he's given himself 2 more years to get that 8th record title in the drivers' championship. But talking about Lewis Hamilton. Didn't have the pace from the outside, he battled Norris for 20 laps until Norris finally gave up after the 5-second penalty he got, and he let Hamilton past almost, it seemed like. But Hamilton had flow damage after that, after the first round of pit stops, and he never had the pace after that. Even on the new hard tires towards the end of the race, it seemed like, Lewis might mount a challenge to Norris, because he was about, 16 seconds behind. 20 seconds behind, something like that, after the last pit stop, and he had just as many laps to do that, but didn't have the pace at all to make any inroads into that gap between him and Norris.
Yeah, definitely. It's not. I mean, it can't be easy for Lewis to fight a championship, defend his championship in a way where his car is not anywhere near the competitor, and he himself is not, you can say, performing at a level you would expect of Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, we have talked about this before. It might be a lot about the pressure that Mercedes are under and Lewis is under. But yeah, I mean, it was a strangely inconsistent race from Lewis, because even earlier in the season, when Mercedes has not had the pace, the car has not had the pace, Lewis tends to give it his all and make that car work. But yeah, I'm not really sure what happened this weekend.
But the car definitely switched on for Valtteri Bottas this weekend, finishing P2 and showing us the pace that he has in that car. Obviously still nowhere near Max Verstappen's Red Bull, but still he did outperform Lewis on pace. Even during the first stint, he was matching Lewis pretty closely, and then towards the end, he was the one to overtake Norris. But I guess that was made easier by the fact that Norris did have a 5-second penalty in the pits. That's when Bottas jumped Norris. But, he defended from Norris pretty well, maintained that gap and never let Norris close by. Finally, a decent weekend from Valtteri Bottas, and this was his best result this season, which is kind of surprising, to a usual fan. You would have expected Valtteri Bottas to have way more P2 finishes, if not a win, at least. By this time in the season, but this has been his best finish, and hopefully it is all upwards from here for him. And Mercedes, I think Toto Wolff also came out and said during the course of the weekend, after the news of Lewis signing the contract came out, that they'll be deciding on their second driver over the course of the summer break. So Valtteri essentially has 2 races to show Mercedes that he's the one that deserves a seat in the Mercedes team for the next 2 years going forward.
Yeah, Valtteri definitely brought his A game at the right time, and he would hope, and everyone hopes that he continues that A game. But this was his 7th podium at the Red Bull Ring, which is the most of any F1 drivers. So definitely he loves that. He loves this circuit. He won here exactly a year ago in the first race of the 2020 season. So yeah, two more races to go for Valtteri Bottas to show that he has got what it takes to stay in the team, which Lewis Hamilton would hope that Bottas stays in the team, because obviously Lewis wants Bottas to stay, but more so if Russell comes to Mercedes, that would be a great power struggle.
Absolutely, and that is something that we all want to see, that how does Lewis Hamilton stack up against a rising rookie, because we've seen Lewis Hamilton be that rookie
Yeah.
during his first couple of years at McLaren against Fernando Alonso, and he beat Alonso pretty well, but we all want to see how does Lewis Hamilton stack up against George Russell, because we've seen the best in the sport falter against some rising rookies, especially Sebastian Vettel, even Daniel Ricciardo had a couple times. We've seen him falter against Max, Daniel Kvyat, and now against Norris, and then so you just don't know what these rookies bring to the team. But let's talk a little bit of silly season here for a couple minutes, right? So if I don't think Valtteri Bottas is going to stay in F1 if he's not in Mercedes. But what happens if George Russell doesn't get the Mercedes seat? There's realistically nowhere else he can move except stay at Williams while being in F1 and being with the Mercedes family, essentially. Because, so suppose the Mercedes seat is taken by Valtteri, right? There's no seats at Ferrari, there's no seats at Red Bull. There's no reason after, the way Sergio has been performing so far for Red Bull to, not take a chance with Sergio for the next year too. And Red Bull do have two pretty good drivers in the junior team right now. There's no reason to recruit George Russell to be in that seat. McLaren don't have a seat. Alpine don't have a seat. So, and Aston Martin don't have a seat. So realistically, that's all. And then you're left with Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams themselves.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
there's not much options for George Russell out there except either to grab that Mercedes seat or just stick with Williams.
yeah, I guess you summed it up pretty well, and I have nothing to add in that, because he clearly does not have anywhere else to go. And Josh Capito himself said that obviously he'll be happy if Mercedes takes Russell, and happy for Russell if Mercedes takes him. But obviously George will always have a seat at Williams next season.
Absolutely. But talking about that, now let's talk about Checo Perez. 200th race for him, kind of a milestone, but not the race he would have hoped for. Started off, had a great qualifying, P3, great qualifying, couldn't match Norris, but not the best race. You may say, he had good race pace, but clearly, Charles Leclerc was faster than him during the course of the race, although he did defend well from him, you could say, in a way, and he did spoil Charles's race. Charles ended up in P8, more than 10 seconds behind Perez, so Perez didn't realistically lose a position to anyone except Carlos at the end of the race with his 10-second time penalty. So, all in all, he did save his race, but not where he would have wanted to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was a very scrappy race from Perez, and even he himself said that those incidents with Leclerc are not the way he races, and are not what he wanted to, not what he wanted to turn out to be. So definitely he had good race pace, and he had, he was in control of the car as such, but certainly defending, and even that incident with Lando Norris overtaking from the outside, a very scrappy race from Sergio Perez. Not the 200 GP
Yeah,
he would have
definitely.
wanted, definitely.
Yeah, but you have to give it up for both Charles Leclerc and Sergio Perez with the car control they showed when they were pushed off track. Didn't crash into the barriers even once, came straight back on track and went racing immediately. But a lot of stats coming out of this weekend, especially for Red Bull. Max Verstappen became the youngest person to have a Grand Slam in Formula One. First person to win 3 races in 15 days, youngest to 50 podiums. And now Red Bull have 5 race wins in a row, the longest streak for Honda since 1988, McLaren, Senna and Prost. So a lot of, positive things coming out for Red Bull after this weekend.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is Red Bull's season to lose, as I said earlier. And we will see a lot more of these stats throughout the season. So yeah, stay tuned.
Yep, absolutely. But Red Bull did nearly make a mistake, and Verstappen was not happy about it when they let out Verstappen to be the the lead car during the final runs of Q3, and Norris nearly got them, only missing out on pole by 500ths of a second. I was in my seat jumping up and down and literally chanting Lando. I'm pretty sure my neighbors thought I was going crazy at 10 in the morning, but I was just hoping for a Lando pole. And in the analysis done by Karan Chandok after the qualifying session, Lando was apparently ahead of Max Verstappen going into turn 9, and it is in turn 9 and 10 that Lando lost, the 500s that he needed to be in pole position. So really disheartening, but I can't wait for that McLaren. I can't wait to see that McLaren go around Monza in qualifying and even in the race with the straight line speed that they have. They've definitely unlocked something with that car. You could definitely see that the McLaren was slower in the corners compared to the Mercedes and Red Bull, but the straight line speed they've been carrying is just insane right now.
Yeah, definitely. We saw that the Q3 lap comparison which Formula 1 uploaded, and Lando was faster than Red Bull on all the straights. Now Red Bull is faster than Mercedes on the straights this season, which we know after that Honda Power Unit upgrade, and McLaren being faster than their engine supply. Exactly. It's very, very encouraging to see.
See, I have said this on the podcast before. I have told you this in person multiple times now. And I'll say it again.
I know what's coming.
Lando Norris is the 2023 world champion with McLaren. You just gotta wait for a couple of years and that will be it. Trust me on this one.
I can't deny that. I really can't deny that at this moment. And
definitely, everybody doubted Lando Norris when he came into Formula 1. Well, not doubted, but, they weren't on board with Lando Norris's performance as much as they were with, Charles Leclerc or George Russell coming into Formula 1. The hype for Lando Norris was not that great. But over the last couple of years, Lando Norris has turned the tables, and I think he's been the most consistent performer compared to George Russell and Charles Leclerc. George and Charles have had their moments, they have had their crashes, whereas Lando Norris has kept his nose clean and delivered those results very, very consistently compared to all his, peers, I guess. I'm not comparing him to, Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri Bottas or Max Verstappen, but compared to his peers, that would be George Russell, Nicholas Latifi, Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. This was Lando's 14th consecutive points finish, his third podium of the season, and his fourth podium in a span of 365 days. So clearly his the last a season and a half have been clearly good for Lando, and he is making those inroads and getting everything out of that McLaren, because I think that Lando is outperforming that car right now, because when we see the McLaren and where they have come from, you wouldn't normally expect them to beat the Mercedes on pure pace and merit, right?
Or even just compete with them throughout a 70-lap race.
Exactly, and Lando Norris was faster than both the Mercedes throughout the weekend, especially in the race and qualifying. So yeah, it's great to see.
McLaren definitely did unlock some pace this weekend compared to the last weekend, because last weekend we saw Norris was struggling for race pace on his second stint, and we had Carlos not been held up by Lewis, Carlos might have, overtaken Norris in the race last week, but that was definitely not the case this week. Norris had great race pace, but at the same time, we were expecting Ricciardo to make progress during this triple header, and I don't think, he might have made progress in the car himself and how he feels with the car and, how comfortable he is, but on paper, for us fans, it just doesn't seem like, Ricciardo has made that step. The only difference between last week and this week was both weekends Ricciardo had a great start, and last weekend he was not able to capitalize on the start because of that engine issue he had during the race, but this time he was able to maintain that advantage, advantage that he had after starting pretty well, after having a really good lap 1. He was able to maintain that throughout the race, but again, lacking race pace on his second stint once again. So I don't know what to expect. Do we really need to give Daniel a whole year before he starts performing in that McLaren like he did in that Renault?
Well, Ricciardo's race craft is as good as any, and we saw it this weekend, because
I'm not taking any of that away from me. He definitely defended well and he definitely overtook well.
Exactly, and that is what brought about that result, the P7. He definitely needs to get his qualifying right, because McLaren clearly have the pace, and Ricardo, as we have seen over the course of the season, starts pretty low and then gets that P6, P7, P8 result. So I mean, if he gets that qualifying right, if he qualifies P8 for a moment, we can expect him to rise up to P6 or P5, and
Yeah, definitely.
and be there with Lando, right?
Yep. Absolutely, and we can only hope that McLaren's home race in 2 weekends, and hopefully they'll have another podium finish with Lando or with Daniel. So let's see if they make that. Talking about Ferrari this weekend, kind of a disappointing qualifying. Losing out to George Russell in the Williams in Q2. Starting 11th and 12th, but not a bad race finish. Carlos delivered as expected. He rose up the ladder. He finished P6, and I don't think he could have done much better. He might have been able to catch up with Perez had Ferrari pitted him a few laps earlier, in my opinion. But I don't think he would have done much better. But you got to say, a mixed weekend for Ferrari. Charles Leclerc's race was obviously hampered by being off track a couple of times with Perez, and then not being able to get past Perez, and then he finished more than 10 seconds behind Perez once Perez finally got past Ricardo. But other than that, there's not much Ferrari could have done. However, still lacking pace compared to the McLaren this weekend. Norris really blitzed both Red Bull and Mercedes like we've talked before, but Ferrari did not show that pace. Ferrari had much more promising pace last weekend.
Definitely, Ferrari has been a roller coaster this season, to be honest, because Charles Leclerc put it on pole twice, and they have failed to qualify for Q3, I guess 2 or 3 or 4 times now. In fact, I may be wrong, but definitely 2 times that I can remember.
I think both Carlos and Leclerc have missed out on Q3 twice this year, or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Ferrari are on the comeback of sorts after last season, so we can give them some leeway in a way, but still we expect so much from them because they are Ferrari and because they have shown promise this season, and they have been competing with McLaren for that P3 spot in the Constructors' Championship. And with Daniel Ricciardo not performing the way everyone hoped, so Ferrari should be taking away those points, which at the moment I think they are not fully optimizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely missing out on this opportunity, and Lando Norris is definitely carrying McLaren in that P3 fight currently. And they did and McLaren did extend the lead over Ferrari this weekend a little bit. I think the lead is at 19 points now. McLaren sitting at 141 points and Ferrari at 122. But everything aside, what was going on with Ferrari? I was pretty upset with Ferrari's strategy once again. I thought they should have pitted Leclerc much earlier, because it was almost as if they weren't the Ferrari crew sitting in the pits or on the pit wall. They weren't even trying to race Sergio and Daniel Ricciardo in the pit stops, right? Because I think Daniel pitted on lap 30, then Sergio pitted on lap 33, and then Leclerc pitted on lap 36, when we clearly know that the undercut is more powerful around Austria. It's not as powerful as it was around France, but it's definitely much more powerful than the overcut around Austria. So I don't know why the Ferrari strategist chose to keep Leclerc out for that many extra laps, when they could have pitted right after Daniel pitted on lap 30 and possibly jumped Perez, because when Perez pitted 3 laps later, he was 4 seconds behind Ricciardo instead of a second behind Ricciardo, like he was, before the first round of pit stops.
Well, you know what they say about Ferrari strategists. You can't trust them.
As a Ferrari fan, it was the most frustrating thing to see, to look at the timing screen on TV live and be able to tell, okay, Leclerc is not going to come out anywhere near Perez or Ricciardo. He's going to be 3 seconds off, and he'll have to overtake those 2 cars. But when clearly, everyone knows that you want to jump those cars in the pit so that you don't lose any race time. And clearly, Leclerc had greater pace advantage, but couldn't make use of it around Austria after getting stuck behind Sergio and Daniel.
See, we have seen this time and time again. Ferrari and their strategy has been questionable more often than not. And it's not about this season or the last few seasons. Since the time I've been following Formula One since 2010, this has been the case. And I mean, Fernando Alonso lost a championship for it. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I can't really say what.
It was so frustrating though. Like I texted you again and again. Obviously my stream was like a couple minutes behind, but I was texting even for science. I thought they pitted him like a few laps late. But yeah, anyway, so that was really the chunk of the Grand Prix. We've already covered Russell's disheartening failed to finish in the points, I guess. But AlphaTauri again coming off with a couple of points. Gasly only driver to make that two-stopper work. Tsunoda getting 2 penalties for the same reason, crossing the white line to pit entry. What was going on with Yuki Tsunoda? Did he not want to finish in the points this weekend? Like, obviously he didn't have the pace that Gasly had, and he might not have finished in the points, but at least a P11 looked more promising than where he finished down at like P14 or 15.
Yeah, I mean, see, that pit entry at the Red Bull Ring is one of the most strangest pit entries.
And it was definitely, a matter of debate throughout, even the free practice sessions and even quali, because I think the stewards did come out and say that you weren't allowed to slow down and make a gap through turns 9 and 10s because people who are going into the pit might impede, who were on a flying lap, might be impeded by people who are going to the pit and people who are trying to start a flying lap. So it was a point of contention throughout free practice and quali, but crossing the white line, I think that's something that they've done, throughout all the junior categories. It's like a consistent rule throughout all categories. It was really surprising to see Yuki make the same mistake twice in the race.
Yeah, I mean the first time you can give him a excuse that okay, no problem, but the second time, I mean, definitely his engineer would have told him that say we have this penalty for this reason. And then he makes the same mistake the second time. So, yeah, definitely not the result or not the penalties he would have hoped for.
Absolutely. And Aston Martin definitely not having the weekend they would have expected after getting into Q3. Starting on the soft, we always knew it was going to be hard for them to come back into the race. It would be a challenging task, but we thought it would be much closer than what it was during the course of the race. The two-stopper did not work for Vettel or for Stroll throughout the race. However, Vettel's race was also hampered by the fact that he had a three-place grid penalty for impeding Alonso in quali. But again, I think both Alonso and Vettel came out and said, it wasn't their fault, particularly like the driver's fault. It's up to the race engineer, who are they dependent on, to tell them that, hey, you need to get out of the way. There's another car coming from behind. So, and I think these are something that are pretty common in like all. It's a pretty common mistake in all of racing, especially circuit racing, and we've seen this happen time and again. But I think there's not much there. They'll talk about it at the next drivers' meeting, and that'll be all. Alpine coming away with a singular point thanks to Fernando Alonso overtaking George Russell during the closing stages of the race. But a good message from I think Fernando came out and said that it was heartbreaking for him to overtake Russell and be the one to deny Russell the points. So kind of a nice gesture from Alonso and mutual respect between both George Russell and Fernando Alonso.
Yeah, Alonso has said a few times in the past that George Russell is a great talent, and I mean he recognizes his talent. And Alonso even gifted Russell a helmet which he had signed future world champion when they swapped helmets, and it was definitely, I mean, as Russell himself said, that if you want anyone behind you at that point, you don't want it to be Fernando. So it was definitely a heartbreaking sight for most, but for me personally, I mean, I was anxious throughout those last 17 laps because for the 7 laps, Alonso was just outside that 1 second, and for 10 laps, he was just under 1 second, but could not make that overtake. because of that brilliant piece of driving from George Russell, brilliant defensive driving, and I I got flashbacks from Abu Dhabi 2010 when Vitaly Petrov denied Fernando Alonso that overtake and defended against Fernando Alonso. So yeah, that was the most anxious I have been all weekend.
Absolutely, and I think there's some mutual respect, and some comments from Lewis towards Lando, calling him a great driver, and that was a little wholesome too, to see mutual respect between the two British drivers. But talking about Esteban Ocon, ever since he's signed that contract, his luck and his driving skills have left him, and it's like Esteban Ocon's on summer break already. He can't wait to just be off of Formula One and come back maybe a year later. Again, I guess this weekend it was not his fault. Definitely did not qualify well. Out in Q1 once again, I think, and then got sandwiched between Mick Schumacher and I think Antonio Giovinazzi. And Giovinazzi taking out his front right suspension. So not his fault in the race, but again, clearly lacking pace, and Fernando is on top of that car. I don't know what has happened in that Alpine garage, but the tables have definitely turned for good.
Fernando has started doing track walks, and
yeah, I heard of that superstition. Yeah.
So that is that. And talking about track walks and senior drivers, all this stuff, Lewis Hamilton has started doing simulator work.
Yeah, a lot of these senior drivers said they didn't do track walk, simulator work, have started doing this since they're under pressure now. And all the tables have turned, and the conditions have changed. And it's really funny to see these guys go back to their roots and you put in that extra bit of work that these young drivers have been putting in for the last couple of years.
Definitely, it's definitely heartbreaking for Ocon because he hasn't had the pace. I mean, since Baku in a way. Hopefully these two weeks gap will help him recover and get that focus back. This triple header was the worst 3 races he could have had in Formula 1, and he'll
definitely not want to return to Austria at all.
Yeah. he'll be happy to forget it.
Yep. Not much from Alfa Romeo, still sitting on 2 points. Williams missing on that singular point finish at both races in Austria, nearly, you could say. Chances to score points for Williams. Hopefully they'll have a good British Grand Prix
at home
in a couple of weeks. But not much news out of Haas either. I think Mazepin gifted Gunther Steiner's. He gave him a door or something as to embrace the meme that Gunther made last weekend about Maz's spin. But again, I think there's been a lot of outrage towards the Haas team embracing the meme that Mazepin is, and the outrage has been in response to Mazepin's action earlier in the year or late last year regarding the sexual harassment charges against him, basically in the public domain, and people have taken this as an attempt by Haas to sweep all of that under the rug, to embrace the meme and to make Mazepin a people favourites, or to get that tag away from him. And people have come out and they've spoken strongly against Haas's efforts to do that. And I don't know what is the way forward for Haas. Should they make a public, I don't know, like a rehab program or like a disciplinary program for Mazepin, showing the people that Mazepin is actually putting the work in, and there is progress being made for Mazepin in that domain, or is there some other way? Because clearly the people are not taking well to whatever the Haas team is trying as a PR or media strategy.
Yeah, it's a very complicated issue in a way. It's straightforward, but in the team dynamics and the politics in Formula 1 and all such things, it's quite strange, and you don't really see all these things in Formula 1 these days, right? So yeah, it's good that Mazepin is, apart from what Haas is doing as a PR exercise, Mazepin is still embracing all the hate he's getting, and he's not letting that hate affect him as a driver. So I would say that is encouraging in a way, but yeah, I don't know the way forward.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess at the end we hope that Mazepin is making an effort to make amends, to improve himself, and recover and be a better person. I guess at the end of the day. But I guess that is all from this weekend's news regarding F1. But in more F1 news, other than that, Audi and Porsche were at the Austrian GP to discuss new engine rules for 2025 with F1, FIA, and all F1 teams. Now that is definitely not a guarantee that Audi or Porsche will be coming into F1 in 2025, but they're definitely evaluating their options, especially after the revamp at both Audi and Porsche regarding their motorsport programs. Also, keep in mind that Pirelli did test the new tires at the Austrian GP during the free practice session, which they may introduce from Silverstone onwards. Also, do not forget that we will be having our very first sprint race at Silverstone in 2 weekends' time in front of a full capacity crowd. Yes, a full capacity crowd at Silverstone. The fans will finally be back in F1.
See, we still like Formula One still has time to withdraw that sprint race thing, but yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to see a sprint race. I'm not.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We'll just see what happens. And if you missed out on the news, Russian GP circuit layout, the Goro Drive has been changed for 2023. There has been an extension to it. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the extension, the changes that have been made to Goro Drive. I don't know what Vedant thinks of it. I'll let him speak in a moment. But also don't forget that the Abu Dhabi circuit layout will be changed. I forget if it's for this year or next year. But again, promising to see that Harman Tilke and F1 are working to, make racing more exciting across the season.
Yeah, the Abu Dhabi layout is for this season, so I guess it's for this season, and we'll see how it works. But regarding the Russian GP moving to that circuit outside St. Petersburg, I forgot the name. It can't be worse than Sochi, right?
Absolutely.
Nothing can be worse than Sochi. So I'm just happy, I guess.
I think it's the same problem with the extension that they've created to make the track longer. It's just I think following, at least for this year, if we had cars from this year, following would be difficult in that third sector, and it would slow the cars down, make the gap bigger, making it difficult to overtake in the DRS zone, basically, on the main straight. Something that happened in Sochi, basically, also. So again, similar issues that might arise at Igora Drive compared to Sochi, but obviously racing should be much better at Igora Drive compared to Sochi, and even just a change, I think, for the first couple of years will be more welcome than just going back to Sochi every year and having a moan about it, just like we do all the time. But that was definitely all from the F1 race weekend. In F3, Red Bull Junior and F3 Championship leader Dennis Hogger took pole in Austria, won the first race starting from P12. In race 2, David Schumacher took a dominating win from pole, while Arthur Leclerc finished P6, making up 21 places after having started 27th on the grid. In race 3, Frederick Vesti beat pole sitter Dennis Hogger to claim victory and move to second place in the championship. Dennis Hogger is currently leading the F3 championship by 41 points. In W Series, defending champion Jamie Chadwick took pole, whereas round 1 winner Alice Powell only qualified 12th, and then Jamie Chadwick went on to take a dominating win, leading the entire race after starting from pole, while Sidorkova and Kimmeline finished second and third. Jamie Chadwick also took the lead of the championship with that win and sits on 33 points after 2 rounds, followed closely by Sarah Moore and Alice Powell in second and third with 29 points apiece. So, the W Series is also definitely heating up. Only 4 points separate the top 3, and Dennis Hogger is currently dominating the Formula 3 championship.
I mean, I have my money on Hogger, and I can't see a way he'll lose that championship, because he's performing every weekend, and he's in that Prema seat, which is arguably the best seat in Formula 3, because Prema, as we know, has been dominant
in any junior category per se.
Exactly. So yeah, 41 points is already a big lead, and they have 3 races every weekend, and we have a lot. I guess we have 5 more weekends. So yeah, a lot of racing to go.
But again, just a word of caution for our listeners: don't go ahead and start comparing W Series lap times to F3 lap times. It's not the same machinery at all. The F3 machinery has 110 more horsepower. It's got different brakes. It's got a different system. It's got more downforce. Although the W Series is equivalent to Formula 3 regional series. So if you follow any of those regional series, you can probably compare the W Series cars and lap times to those series. But another news: by the time you probably hear us out, look at our video, or catch us up anywhere on any platform, Peugeot Sport Hypercar reveal would have happened. So go check that out too if you haven't already. But that's all from my side. Any closing thoughts from you, Vedant?
Well, see, we have had 4 races at the Red Bull Ring in the last 365 days. Before that time, I was not a fan of the Red Bull Ring. And in those 4 races, and the kind of races we have had, suddenly, over the course of 1 year, the Red Bull Ring has now become, I would say, my top 5 race tracks. So, definitely a great weekend and a great triple header we had. Red Bull dominating, which we don't usually see anyone other than Mercedes dominating. But definitely looking forward for Silverstone. As you said, a full capacity crowd. We saw the Dutch fans, Max Verstappen fans in Austria, the Orange Army.
Whoa. They were not Max Verstappen fans. They were Lando Norris McLaren fans, alright?
Yeah, so, we saw the Orange Army, and we know the British fans are the craziest of the lot. So, it would be great to see the British GP in a few weeks' time.
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you for sharing that with us, Vedant. Thank you for being here with me once again. And we'll catch you guys again next week. So, see you then.